So you often heard your parents or even grandparents says that vegetable is good for you. Our study provides scientific support that vegetable is good for you.
Hello, I'm Sophie Rodner from the American Chemical Society. Welcome to this media briefing from ACS Fall 2023. Young vegetables known as microgreens are reputed to be particularly good for health. Now, researchers are trying to find out if microgreens, which can easily be grown at home, are the superfood they're claimed to be, and how they compare to mature veggies. Results to date show their nutritional profiles differ, as do their effects on gut bacteria. Yet, tests in mice suggest that both microgreen and mature vegetables can limit weight gain. To tell us more about this, we're joined today by Tom Wang from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to highlight our work.
Tom, where did you get the idea to do this research?
Well, it started from a visit from a University of Maryland graduate student, and she came over to give a presentation in our center. It happened that she worked with one of my colleagues, Dr. Sunny Law. Sunny is a food technologist. Her interest is in growing production as well as food quality. And my interest is in nutrition. When we start talking, we thought that there is still questions not answered regarding vegetable growing at different stages. In this case, the stage is called microgreen. We then work with another scientist from University of Maryland, Lucy Yu, who's a food chemist and focus on the analytical aspect. And that's how things started. We think we have a good collaboration with a whole spectrum of scientists working on this particular project.
And what is a microgreen?
Microgreen is a small, younger version of mature vegetable. It's about 7 to 21 days old when you harvest it. This is very different from sprout because sprout are much younger.
Can you briefly describe your current research and your findings?
So we're using an animal model to test the effect of kale, microgreen, as well as mature kale. The question we're asking is whether it prevent the high-fat diet induce weight gain. The other thing we're looking at is whether consuming these vegetable changes the gut microbiome, because gut microbiome seems to be associated with a lot of health or chronic diseases incidents.
All right, so what did you find out in your research?
What we found out was that consuming either the young version of kale or a mature version of kale attenuate the high-fat diet increase in body weight. The other thing we found out was that consuming these vegetable can changes the gut microbiome.
What are the implications of these findings?
Well, implication is that the microgreen is as good or similar to the mature kale. The other thing is, since microgreen can be grown at home, it may be more or less easier accessible vegetable. So, for example, if you cannot get kale in the wintertime, you can always grow some microgreen. So that to me is the so-called positive side of having microgreen as a food.
Based on your research, why do you think the effects of mature kale differ from those of microgreens?
Well, their composition are very different. For example, some of the bioactive compounds such as glucosinolate is much higher in the microgreen. I believe the fiber content also are different. It seems like mature obviously will have a little bit higher fiber. So it could be that all these different combination of composition maybe led to slightly different between the mature versus the microgreen.
And for people who don't like the taste of these types of vegetables, either in the microgreen or mature form, is there a way that the flavor could be improved?
So most of the flavor, which mostly bitterness, is coming from those so-called good phytochemicals such as glucosinolates and other we've called it phytoalexin, where the plant generate defense against stress. Those tend to be bitter compound, and people does not like it. Depends on who eat them. So it's possible that you can grow it so that less of the compound get generated. But there's always a good side and bad side, because these are compounds that the plant produce against pests or stress and things like that. So that's a survival of the plant you have over there, and so that you just have to have a balance. So in theory, you can grow them so that you have the less of the bitter compound, but also the plant is equally healthy and can be eaten by people who are dislike of the bitterness.
If the bitter compounds are the ones that promote health, won't that reduce the nutritional value of these foods?
Not necessarily. I think the critical question is how much you're taken up by an individual, because if you reach a certain threshold, it can still provide sufficient protection against disease or anything like that. So it really depends.
What will you do next in your microgreen research?
There are a few things that we'd like to do. One of the questions we like to ask is if you're growing in a different condition, whether the phytochemical level in these microgreen are different. And we also like to take it one step further and ask the question whether those differences can have some kind of effect, biological effect. And in our case, either body weight or changes in the microbiome. So that's the main research that we would plan to do in the immediate future. But at the longer term, we would like to do some kind of human study, but that's more expensive and need to take a longer term view on it.
Right, thank you for sharing your research with us.
Thank you.
Be sure to check out our other media briefings for ACS Fall 2023, which will be posted throughout the meeting at www.acs.org/ACS Fall 2023 briefings.